You know why I take issue with left-wing racists so much more than right-wing racists? It's because right-wing racists are overt. You can see them. You know they exist, and they actually have no problem claiming to be racist. And I can avoid them, and I can argue with them, and I can say, I just don't like you, because for those that watch my channel, you know, I really, really don't like racists. Really don't. And the reason I so often rant about left-wing racists is because they hide behind anti-racism when they in fact are significantly more racist than any moderate. Look, they are moderate Democrats and moderate conservatives, not racist. But the left likes to claim that all the Trump supporters and all the conservatives are racist, and they're not. There is a small fringe minority of people associated with the right who are racist, and there is a massive left-wing activist base that is completely racist, and we now have the evidence from Yale that proves this. Listen to this. White liberals present themselves as less competent in interactions with African Americans. You kidding me? I can't believe, when I saw this, I didn't believe it. Seriously, didn't believe it. There's a video from Ami Horowitz, okay, where he asks Berkeley College students if they think voter ID laws are racist. And what do they say? It is. Why? Oh, they claim that black people can't afford IDs or they don't have the internet, which is complete and utter racist nonsense. He then goes and meets some black people and asks them, do you have an ID? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, do you have the internet? And they're like, what are you talking about? One dude, my favorite, he's like, what are you talking about? Like 10-year-old kid with a cell phone's got internet. And he asked one guy, do you know where the DMV is? And he goes, yeah, it's right there on 26th Street. Why do these liberals believe it's the soft bigotry of low expectations? It's the white savior. Most progressives are white, middle to upper class, and they must just believe that minorities are dumb and inferior. And I think my favorite my favorite name for the regressive left, not name but descriptor, is white supremacists with guilty consciences. Because look at this story. This is going to blow your mind. A new study suggests that white Americans who hold liberal socio-political views use language that makes them appear less competent in an effort to get along with racial minorities. What? In what capacity does pretending to be less competent mean you'll get along with racial minorities unless you think they are less competent, right? And this is really funny. Conservatives don't, by the way. Yeah. So here we go. This is from Yale Insights. Racial bias can put people of color at a disadvantage when interviewing for a job, buying a house, or interacting with the police. New research suggests that bias may also shape daily interactions between racial minorities and white people, even those whites who tend to be less biased. Which is really funny here. See how they framed it? Whites who tend to be less biased. What, do you mean the conservatives? Because according to your own study, it's the liberals who are biased. According to a new research by Sidney Dupree, an assistant professor of organizational behavior at Yale SOM, white liberals tend to downplay their own verbal competence in exchanges with racial minorities compared to how other white Americans act in such exchanges. The study is scheduled for publication in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. While many previous studies have examined how people who hold racial bias in multiracial settings, few have studied how whites, who are more well-intentioned, interact with people of other races. There's less work that explores how well-intentioned whites try to get along with racial minorities, Dupree says. We wanted to know their strategies for increasing connections between members of different social groups and how effective these strategies are. Dupree and her co-author, Susan Fisk of Princeton, began by analyzing the words used in campaign speeches delivered by Democratic and Republican presidential candidates to different audiences over the years. They scanned 74 speeches delivered by white candidates over a 25-year period. Approximately half were addressed to mostly minority audiences. At a Hispanic small business roundtable discussion or a black church, for example, they then paired each speech delivered to a mostly minority audience with a comparable speech delivered at a mostly white audience. At a mostly white church or university, for example, the researchers analyzed the text of these speeches for two measures: words related to competence, that is, words about ability or status, such as assertive or competitive, and words related to warmth, that is, words about friendliness, such as supportive and compassionate. Warmth related to intentions toward others, and competence related to the ability to carry out those intentions, are two fundamental dimensions of how we see others and portray ourselves in social interactions. Stereotypical portrayals of black Americans generally show them as being less competent than their white counterparts, but not necessarily less friendly or warm, Dupree explains. You ready? You ready for the big part? The team found that Democratic candidates used fewer competence-related words in speeches delivered to mostly minority audiences than they did in speeches delivered to mostly white audiences. The difference wasn't statistically significant in speeches by Republican candidates, though. It was harder to find speeches from Republicans delivered to minority audiences, Dupree notes. There was no difference in Democrats or Republicans' usage of words related to warmth. It was really surprising to see that for nearly 3 decades, Democratic presidential candidates have been engaging in this predicted behavior. Let me just express this again. While they did find less speeches from Republicans to minorities, Democrats pretended to be, or I should say pretend to be, but use less competent words when speaking to minorities. With this preliminary evidence in hand, the researchers set out to further test their ideas. They designed a series of experiments in which white participants were asked to respond to a hypothetical or presumed real interaction partner. For half of these participants, their partner was given a stereotypically white name, such as Emily. For the other half, their partner was given a stereotypical black name, such as Lakeisha. Participants were asked to select from a list of words for an email to their partner. For some studies, this email was for a work-related task. For others, this email was simply to introduce themselves. Each word had been previously scored on how warm or competent it appears. The word sad, for example, scored low for both warm and competence. Melancholy, on the other hand, scored high for competence and low for warmth. So you understand what it means by competence. They're saying words that are obscure or tend to be related to a higher, an expanded vocabulary. This is where, okay, now here's the grand slam. This is where it really kicks into high notch. High gear. The researchers found that liberal individuals were less likely to use words that would make them appear highly competent when the person they were addressing was presumed to be black rather than white. No significant differences were seen in the word selection of conservatives based on the presumed race of their partner. It was kind of an unpleasant surprise to see this subtle but persistent effect. Dupree says, even if it's ultimately well-intentioned, it could be seen as patronizing. This is one of the biggest gripes I have with the tribal, mainstream, liberal left, whatever you want to call it. And I'll say it for the millionth time, my politics firmly fall center-left. I agree with a ton of economic policy that aligns with the left. I even agree with some policy that seeks to alleviate racial injustice. And I'll be specific. Blockbusting and redlining were wrong, and it is good that they are no longer legal practices, in my opinion. However, it is undeniable, Yale showing us that liberals they use words that make themselves less competent when they're talking to black people. Why? Why? Well, according to the study, it's because they're trying to relate better. That's what they said in the beginning. What did they say specifically? They said to get along with racial minorities. Why do you need to pretend to be dumb to get along with racial minorities? Are you somehow implying that minorities can't understand your big words? This is what really, really bothers me about the mainstream left. And they straight up, look, no significant differences were seen in the word selection of conservatives based on the presumed race of their partner. Really? What you're saying is that conservatives treat people like they're equal, and liberals assume that minorities aren't as competent, or they think they need to appear lesser? There's a couple conclusions we can draw from this. One, the soft bigotry of low expectations, that white people assume black people won't understand the words they use, so they try and speak down to them. Or we can assume that the white people are trying to present themselves as beneath them or something. It's entirely strange. Dupree and Fisk suspect that the behavior stems from a liberal person's desire to connect with other races. One possible reason for the competence downshift, as the authors describe it, is that regardless of race, people tend to downplay their competence when they want to appear likable and friendly. But it's also possible this is happening because people are using common stereotypes in an effort to get along. Yeah, that's where I'd put it. Initial data from follow-up studies suggest that describing a black person as highly intelligent, thus reversing the stereotype, or as already highly motivated to get along with whites, thus removing the need to prove goodwill, can reduce the likelihood that a white person will downplay their competence in their interactions with the black person. I think the conclusion is clear here. According to a Yale study and follow-up studies, liberal individuals, liberal white people, pretend to be less competent when talking with minorities in an effort to get along. But when they tell the person that the black person that they're interacting with is intelligent, then the white people no longer pretend to be less competent, which says to me they are racist, and they believe that minorities are not as smart as they are. The white savior complex. It ends by saying, there's a lot of research focused on biased individuals and how holding bias, especially implicit bias, can influence social interactions. But that leaves a lot of people out. My hope is that this work will help include well-intentioned people who see themselves as allies, but who may be unwittingly contributing to group divides. There's a broader need to include them in our conversation. And look at this. Here's the best part. Sydney Dupree, she's a black woman, an intelligent professor of organizational behavior who has done great science. I really can't stand the identitarian divide. I can't stand racists. I can't stand the people on the left who would take a look at an individual and based on their skin color make assumptions about their intelligence. It's the same is true for people on the right, but the conservatives reject these people. This study shows you they do. That conservatives are not going to pretend to be less competent when talking to minorities, but liberals do. And that's why I think we can see we've got the statement that the regressive left are white supremacists with guilty consciences. Well, now you got the scientific data to back it up. They really do believe they're smarter. I think that's a fair assessment. I cannot stand those who hide behind anti-racism, but when the studies come out proving they're actually racist. And look, this is not about the individuals. There are a lot of white people who are not racist. And you can see it when they speak and they say, I don't care about your race, your gender, your nationality. I'm here to speak about the content of your character. I'm here to learn who you are as a person. Congratulations, Yale. Thank you for doing the work. And I think, I don't know, whatever. This stuff just really pisses me off all the time. I appreciate this work of Sydney Dupree. Thank you for looking into this, and thank you for science. I'll see you guys tomorrow.